well, that makes sense. I tried everything that everyone says you're supposed to do. Get the girl, get the money, get the career, make the things happen, be the powerful person. And then after that happened, I didn't get what I was supposed to get. My priorities needed to be fixed somehow. So if we start at the very beginning, one of my earliest memories was thinking of money. Whenever I got some money for Christmas or a birthday present, or I had made something and collected it, I would save that money. And I remember my father saying, like, yeah, you should save the money and then you buy something big that you wanted. And I would save money, and I was really good at saving money. I would save money and then I'd buy something big, whatever that may be. It was a toy or a bicycle. For a while I did archery, and then I was into astronomy, and I had all these hobbies. And I thought the thing you were supposed to do was to save money, work towards that, and then you would get that thing. So first it was toys and things for my hobbies, and then it was a moped, because when you're 15 in Sweden you could drive a moped. And then after that I wanted a motorcycle, and then you wanted a car, and then you had all the things that came with that. But then I turned 16, 17, 18, and then I figured out, okay, wait a minute, it's not actually money, it's girls. That's what life is all about. I just need to find the girl. And I started looking for a girl because there was this need inside of me somehow that I thought I would get by getting these things. I now figured out that, well, it's love. I just need a person to fill this part of me to make me feel complete. When I met my first real love, you know, the one that the teenage love where you just go like, no one's ever been in love the way I am in love now. Other people might think they've been in love, but there's nothing, because this is love, and everyone else just missed it, because somehow when we experience something new, we believe that no one else could have possibly experienced this because it's so new to us. So I met this girl, and I thought, yeah, she is the one, but then that didn't really work out. And then I met another one, and she was the one. And then I met someone else, and she was the one for a while, until she wasn't. There was always something wrong with the girl. There obviously wasn't anything wrong with me. It was something with them that made it not work. And then I grew up a bit, and I thought, no, girls, that's like, no, that's not what it is. Like, that was when we were young. It's actually a career. I need to find out what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to make a career, kind of back to making money, but not just making money to get the things, but I actually want to make a career. I want to create something, or maybe find my destiny, or whatever, however I wanted to see that. So I started looking for something that was my thing. I studied economy. I was really into that, and I for a while I studied musical arts, dancing and ballet, and singing was my main forte. So I did that for a while, and I looked around, and then eventually I thought, okay, I need to somehow make a career, and I wanted to do it in making my own business. If you want to make a successful business, you have to learn how to sell. So I started selling, and I got really good at selling because I loved it. I loved talking to people. I loved talking to people and finding out about them. I really, really enjoyed it, and I kept going up. And I had these, if you've ever worked in sales, you know that you set goals of how much you're supposed to sell, and then you reach that goal, and then you just raise it to the next one. And I kept doing that until I had in my mind a goal of, when I make this much money, then I'll be happy. Whatever it is I was looking for was going to happen when this happened. And I was fortunate that I was pretty young when I went through all of this. 29, 30-ish, I think, around that age. So I kept going up, and I just climbed up the sales ladder until I was one of the best salespeople in my department. And I earned, the last year that I worked as a salesperson, I earned almost twice as much as I do now, like 15 years later, which is crazy. But I earned a lot of money, and I was living by myself, and I could just do whatever I wanted because I just had so much money at that time. So I remember the time when I hit my goal of, like, when I make this much money, then I made it. And I made that goal, and I went home, and I remember thinking, like, yes, I did it. And I opened the door, I came inside, and there was nothing. It was just an empty apartment. In my mind, somehow, it felt like when I reached that point, there's going to be, I'll come home and there'll be lots of people just throwing confetti, and like, whoa, well done, Martin, you did it, wow, you're so awesome. And I would just feel this joy forever, but nothing happened. And this is, it was just my mind just went like, wait a minute, like this doesn't make any sense. Everyone says you're supposed to do these things, and you're supposed to get some kind of reward, but then nothing happened. And for a few days I was almost not depressed like that. Now when I actually know what being depressed means, I wouldn't say depressed, but I was feeling down, and I was thinking like, what the heck? Like, this was supposed to be it, and what do I do now? Should I just raise the goal again? What's the point of that? So after I had attained my goal of sales, where I had achieved that goal, I thought, this is how far I'm gonna get, and then something is gonna happen. I went for a backpacking journey. I went to Sri Lanka, I went to scuba dive in the Maldives, and I was away for 3 or 4 months. And I just traveled around, and before this, just before this happened, I was on we worked on regions when we were selling, and I was selling on Stockholm, I remember. And I was making so much money. I was making more than, like, what I basically make in a day now, I would make in an hour. My grandmother, whom I was very close to, we would talk. She would call me 3 times, 4 times every week, and we'd talk. And she'd always call with some excuse. Like, Martin, I read in the newspaper about this thing here. Is that really true? Is that how it is? And she was always too afraid to just call and say, hey, how are you? And I thought it was sweet. And I would always talk for her, like with her. I always enjoyed talking on the phone. So we would talk for half an hour, about all kinds of things. And my grandmother, she was world famous in the little town where we're from, with making these buns, these really delicious buns that everyone loved. And she would bake, every month she'd bake hundreds of them, and she'd give them away to charity, to friends, and they'd sell them like all kinds of places for charity. And if she came somewhere, she always brought like a bag of like 20, 30, 40 of these buns. Or when I went to fix my car, we would get like a bag of buns to just bring to them, because she was just that kind of person. She loved making them. And this was her recipe. No one else knew this recipe. So I said, Grandmother, can you teach me how to make those buns? Because I enjoyed baking. And she said, yes, of course, Martin, just come over and then I'll show you. But I was on this project, like I just said, where I made so much money. And this was the month before I was leaving for this big journey. And she was actually coming there. We were going there to celebrate my father's, I think that was when we celebrated my father's 60th birthday. Yeah, difficult to remember right now. But we were celebrating a birthday, and she was there, so she was coming with us. And I said, you know what, Grandma, we'll just do it after we come back, because I was making so much money then by working a little bit extra that I thought I'll do that, and then after I can do it. And she came with us to Sri Lanka, and we celebrated, and then she died. And I remember it so clearly. When I found out that she had died, we were in a hotel in the southern part of Sri Lanka, and my mother was on the phone saying, like, and she was hysterical because she's Sri Lankan, and they have this like, oh, everything is like, they're very emotional when things like this happen. And Grandmother's dead, and I was like, calm down, Mama, like, just tell me she can't be dead, like, just what happened, like, what is it? And my mind just wouldn't get it, like, I couldn't understand it. And she had died. And the main thing on my mind was, how am I going to learn to make these buns? Like, I can't, my mind just like, it went like this. It couldn't really compute, because death is so final. Everything else we can negotiate, we can talk about, we can discuss this. No, this is not how it happened. I say it happened like this, so you're wrong. Or like, you know, fake news stuff. We can always look at it from a different angle and say that we're right, or like deny. Death is final. There is nothing to discuss. Dead is dead. Like, you can't come back from death. You're dead. And my mind was just scrambled after that. I couldn't really think, and it hit me quite hard, because we were so close. I wouldn't even say quite hard. It hit me really hard because we were close, and I had this thing that really made me think, like, okay, if she's now gone, and how am I going to talk to her? And I have all these memories of things she did just before she passed away, and like my daughter now sings one of the songs that she walked around singing just before she passed away. My daughter, for some reason, likes that. She sings that all the time, which is very sweet to hear. She was such a sweet person. She wasn't there for me anymore. And she had always been there. She had always, yeah. So she being gone changed something. It wasn't just that I had reached this goal and nothing happened. It was that this happened at the same time. Like it was just like a few weeks in between, I think. And it really made me question, like, what the heck am I doing? What's the point of this? And I remember coming back from my journey, and I came back and I started working again. And I used to love selling because basically we worked business to business. So I talked to them and I asked them, what are you doing? And I was interested in their company, and I found that I learned so much about life and about business and about the people I sold to. So for me, it was a very enjoyable experience, but I came back and I just couldn't enjoy it. Just the idea of reaching another goal to make more money was kind of like, she's dead, and I'm not going to learn how to make the buns that she made. And that was like, it's such a big part of who she was this generosity of wanting to give to people, and her buns was a very nice symbol of that. My priorities needed to be fixed somehow. I thought, like, what's the point of me making all this extra money before she left? Like, if I could change now, today, that money for having spent one evening with her baking buns, learning how to make them, that would have been worth anything. So I came back, and I remember sitting talking to one of my colleagues, and she asked, so Martin, what do you really want to do? Like, what is it you want? And I said, I don't know, I just want to become a Buddhist monk. What the heck? The dumbest idea I've ever had. And I remember saying it, and she was like, yeah, what do you really want to do? But my mind was like, oh, that makes sense. I tried everything that everyone says you're supposed to do. Get the girl, get the money, get the career, make the things happen, be the powerful person. And then after that happened, I didn't get what I was supposed to get, because I still felt I needed to get somewhere. So I'm not a rash person. I actually waited 2 days before I went to my boss and I said, okay, I'm gonna quit because I need to go to Asia to live as a Buddhist monk. And I remember her looking at me kind of like, okay, Martin, I just gave you 2 or 3 months off to go traveling, backpacking. I can't do it again. You have to wait another year, and then you can do that. She just didn't understand. No, you're not getting it. I'm going to sell everything I have, and I'm going to go away, and I'm going to live as a Buddhist monk. And she's like, oh, has he gone crazy? Like, is something wrong with him? Should I call the psych ward or something? Like, I had to sit down and really talk with her because she couldn't really understand it at first. So eventually she understood, okay, he's going to quit. So I spent half a year just hanging out with friends, partying as much as I could. I used to fly, and I still fly model airplanes. I did that every day. It was good weather. I just traveled around in Sweden. I met another girl just before I left. And it's much easier to fall in love when you're going away, because then there's no commitment. So it's easier to open up. And I had a really good half year before I left. And then I left on my epic journey. I was going to make this trip. I was going to go away, and I was going to become a Buddhist monk. And I was so full of myself. Like, looking back now, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so embarrassing. So I left for this grand journey, and I in my mind, I was going to go to Tibet. I was going to meet the Dalai Lama, and we were going to sit up on a mountain meditating and discussing these finer parts of like life and how it works. And I was going to figure things out, and I was going to make a book. I was going to write this book, and I was going to save the world. And I was so enthusiastic, and I had so much I want to do this, help people. I want to do something with my life that's important. Just tell me what it is, because this thing didn't work. So I left. I started working as a scuba diving guide, a dive guide. I worked in Palau, which is an amazing place, and I worked in Sri Lanka, Philippines, and I was scuba diving. I met one girl for a little while, and then, well, it didn't really work out. And I started photographing. I did stock photography, something called micro stock, where you, basically, I would just walk up to random people when I was out traveling, and I'd say, hey, can I do a photo shoot with you? And we'd work together for a day, and they got the photos for free, and I would sell them. So I would do that, and I started out with a camera, and then I got a lens, and then I got a bigger lens, and I got flashes, and I got more stuff, and I had a computer, and in the end, I had a huge bag with like flashes and stuff, and I think I was close to 30 kilos in my backpack because I could barely move around. And I was just traveling around having fun, like I really enjoyed it. And then I met the girl, not a girl, the girl, because obviously, you know, I couldn't have met her in Sweden because she was not Swedish. She's from England, so that wouldn't work. Like, I needed to go on this journey to figure out I was going to become a photographer, and then I was going to meet this girl, and that was the reason behind all of this. But then when you think about it, haven't I done this before? I mean, a bigger salary, a bigger girlfriend, or a better girlfriend, or well, maybe like bigger girlfriend, whatever you enjoy. Everything needed to be more and bigger. And now I was doing the same thing. I was just doing it somewhere else. And I had told myself that this is different. It's not the same because I'm following my path, my destiny, my journey. I'm outside doing something. But I was still doing the same thing. And fortunately, it just didn't work out at all between me and this girl eventually. She went back, and we met one more time, but yeah, it didn't work. And we were terrible together. Funny thing about that was also that her name was the same name as my first girlfriend. And I think I've had 4 girlfriends with the same name. It was easy. I should have gotten a tattoo because then I could have just said like, yeah, all of them, same name. So, yeah, I really thought that was the thing, but fortunately it didn't work out. And then I thought after 2 years, you know, it's fun to go to the Taj Mahal, but after 2 years it's another Taj Mahal, and it's just another barrier reef, or you just keep seeing these things and it gets a bit daily life, and it's not the same excitement. It's not the same thing if you keep doing that every day. So then I thought, now is probably a good time to become a monk, but I hadn't really gotten to Tibet yet. I had seen the Dalai Lama in I think it was a ceremony in, is it Dharamsala where he's staying? I saw him there, and me and like another 1,000 people or something. And I still had this idea like, oh, I need to find the perfect teacher. I need to figure something out. There's some secret to life that I need to learn. But I had met a Sri Lankan monk while I was at a meditation retreat in Sri Lanka. And he was a bit more Western than most Sri Lankan monks. In Sri Lanka, it's tradition that usually you become a monk at the age 7 to 10 or 12, and then you stay a monk for the rest of your life. Many other countries have different traditions. So you actually become monk for shorter periods, and everyone is expected to do a part of your life as a monk in certain countries, but not in Sri Lanka. And he wanted to westernize it a little bit and make it a bit more modern. So he wanted Western people and other Sri Lankans also, of course, to come in and become monks, but for shorter periods of time. And then if they enjoyed it, then they could stay monks. So when we started out, I think we said 3 months. That was like the plan to begin with. And I spent 3 months or 4 months with him before, where I traveled around with him and I drove him around and I got to learn what it actually meant. Then was the day when I was going to be ordained as a monk. And Sri Lankan TV was there. There was like hundreds of people, and they had looked at the astrology chart, choose the most auspicious date for me to be ordained as a monk. And it was such a big thing. My relatives who are Sri Lankan and still live in Sri Lanka, they were there and they were crying, and they were so happy and so proud, because in Sri Lanka it's considered a big thing. If one of your children or relatives becomes a monk, that's like the biggest gift you can give, kind of, is to give away one of your children to the Dhamma, to the truth, to the Sangha, to make sure that the Buddhism lives on, kind of. And I was so like hyped up. I'm like, oh yes, this is awesome. This is gonna be cool. I'm gonna be a monk and I'm gonna learn all these things and I'm gonna help the world. I'm gonna save everyone. And then rather quickly I noticed something, that many monks, what I wanted to do then, and many monks also did, was that, okay, I want a bigger center. I want more people to become Buddhist. I need to help more people learn how to meditate. I need to help more people become whatever they want to become. And they didn't want financial or like relationship success. They wanted to do success in Buddhism, whatever that meant. And I got like, I've done this before, haven't I? Like, this is just the same thing I did before. Sure, they lived in celibacy, they didn't drink, we only ate breakfast in the mornings, and before 12 o'clock you have to eat breakfast. And we'd sing these holy chants, morning, lunch, and dinner. But again, I was born and raised as an atheist, so for me, like, I don't know if they're holy. Like, that was not really why I became a monk. I didn't become a monk because I'm a Buddhist. I became a monk because I wanted to understand my mind, me, how I work. There was something in here that's happening that I don't understand. Like, why am I not happy when I've done what everyone told me to do? It only took a few months, and then I thought, well, this is not at all what I wanted. Because sure, I live as a monk and we have precepts we follow that are supposed to be very holy and special, but if you look at a poor person living on the street in Colombo, they live on like a piece of cardboard on the floor, which if a monk would have done that, it would have been like, oh, that's so spiritual, that's so amazing. He's living on usually you would sleep on a bamboo mat on like concrete floor. If you're really hardcore, that's what you would do, because that's living very simple. You'd have no belongings. Well, the poor person in Colombo, he wouldn't have any belongings either. He'd live without food. The poor person would do that also. So like these things, for me, were not spiritual or holy, or I always saw them as part of something that was supposed to lead to something else. That they were supposed to be an environment to create something, but everyone just seemed to say that, well, getting enlightened or figuring these things out or experiencing these states, jhanas or concentration states, we can't do that now. They could do that in the old days, but nowadays, no, we can't do that. That's like long forgotten. Fortunately, I went to a meditation retreat that is called a Vipassana retreat, created by a man called Goenka. Basically the McDonald's of meditation retreats. They're amazing, really good. They exist all over the world, and I think they're an introduction to so many people who want to start meditating, because they're donation based also, so that there's not a real fee, it's only what you want to give. And I went there and I meditated for 10 days. I think it's 10 hours per day, or maybe it's 8 hours, I don't actually remember. And my mind was just, oh my God, this is why I left to become a Buddhist monk. This is what I wanted. I wanted to see what happens when you actually meditate. And like most monks don't have time to meditate so much, because they're so busy doing all these rituals and reading texts or chanting that they don't have time to meditate. I've even had quite a few monks that told me like, oi, I went to a retreat, but I don't have time to meditate all the time because I'm so busy reading about the textures or learning Pali, which is the language which all the old Buddhist texts and Theravada tradition are written in. So I don't have time to meditate. Or maybe they'll sit like 10 minutes in the morning, or they do the chanting and they consider that meditation, which is true to a point. But this was something else, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. So I went there, and eventually I came into a Burmese tradition, which is called, I think the main teacher is Sayadaw, Mahasi Sayadaw, or Sayadaw Mahasi, something like that, which has an even stricter practice. In the Vipassana retreats, you just sit down for 10 minutes and you have one technique, and they consider their technique to be the technique. They're open to other techniques, but this is their technique, kind of rather narrow-minded. The Burmese, they are more intense, and they do a little bit wider. They do walking and sitting meditation, and the really intense centers, they would have 15 or 16 hours per day meditation, and then 1 hour extra in your room if you were serious. And it's difficult to get that much meditation time in per day, because you have to eat and you have to do some kind of like cleaning yourself and resting. But they were really good at that, and when you do that, it's difficult to compare that kind of meditation to when you're doing 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, an hour here. Like even like if you would do 5 hours per day, it's just so different from what you do in those centers. And you do it, I would do it in 3 months in a row. So I'd do 3 months, then I'd have a short break, and then I'd do another 3 months, and I'd move to another center. And I always made sure I never stayed longer than 3 months. I don't think I ever stayed longer than 3 months in one center, because if you do, then you get part of the establishment, and then you're expected to, well, since I was good in meditating and I knew a lot about it, people wanted me to be more of a part of the center. And I loved coming there, sharing what I knew and like sharing with people. When I was at centers that allowed talking, most of the centers were non-talking. But I didn't want to get stuck and become a religious person. I wanted to become a meditating monk. That's what I was after. And I really found that here. And I got to go between these centers, where in Asia it was really intense and we meditated most of the waking day. It was just spent in meditation. I also spent a lot of time, actually it was the summertime, I would spend in Europe. After 2 years, I think I went back, and I wanted to find a center in Europe where I could practice, and I found Plum Village with a tradition called Thich Nhat Hanh, which is amazing, really, really good center. I love those centers. But they were so different. In those centers, they didn't meditate. I think they had every week, like if you would combine it, it was like 5 hours of sitting meditation or walking meditation per week. I do that before lunch in Asia. And we would sing, there would come people from the outside, and we'd have much more sharing. You'd sit in a circle, you'd share what you'd gone through, and it was much more mindfulness, being aware, and they had a completely different practice. And the people in Asia, they would say like, oh, those people are like crazy, that's not Buddhism, because that's just, I don't know what they're doing. The people there would say like, yeah, the people meditating so much, they're so selfish, they don't know what they're doing, and they're usually a little bit crazy, because you can actually, when it's that intense, it's quite common that your mind kind of, you can lose control sometimes. That's why you always have a teacher with you when you're doing intensive meditation like that, because you need someone to guide you through it. It can be quite scary when you sit that much with your mind. So I got to see all of these different traditions, and I was on forums, I was reading, and I read books about Buddhism and other traditions and their meditation, and I really wanted to understand how it all worked. Now, from that, I developed my own practice, which I won't take up in this video, because it's a story of itself. But in the end, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm so happy that I went away and took that time to really invest in myself. And I learned how many things you can get sidetracked by, and just because you're a Buddhist monk doesn't mean that you're gonna figure out what it means, well, figure out what it is you're supposed to do. I was very fortunate because I did not get too caught up in the religious part of Buddhism. I was able to move around to different centers and do what I wanted to do, which was understanding my mind, which I did through meditation and mindfulness practice, and in my own way did what I wanted to do. So when I left because I felt that I had done what I needed to do, and I wanted to bring that into daily life, because it's one thing being aware and calm and peaceful in an environment where everything is made to make sure that you're aware and present in that moment. But it's a completely different thing to do it when you're living life and have a job and a wife and children and things going on around you and have to think about an economy. That's a different thing. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it in some way has inspired you, helped you, or maybe you found something that's useful for your practice. Thank you.